This is a production of WNVC, Channel 56, Fairfax, Virginia.
Topping the news from the state capitol this week, the high costs of getting well. I'm Randy Davis, and this is Richmond Report the Week. Don't look for the costs of health care in Virginia to be coming down anytime soon. State Health Commissioner Dr. James Kenley this week said that while rising health care technology has helped care for patients, the cost of this new technology have almost stripped them of their ability to pay. And he doesn't see any change in that situation soon.
To be honest with you, with the demands of our public today, with the rising technology, I do not see that the cost of health care will go down. I think what we want to try to do is to assure efficiencies in the system the best we can, and I hope that we can approach a feeling that we are getting our money's worth.
Dr. Kenley urged the Senate Health Committee to retain their Certificate of Need program to help hold down health care costs. Virginia athletes brought home more medals from this year's Olympics than did some small countries. With that as a motivation, the state this week paid tribute to our native Olympians in a ceremony here at the state capitol. Opening with its own version of the Olympic torch run, this afternoon's salute featured bands, flags, and distinguished guests. State employees had been encouraged to slip away from their desks to join students from local schools in the Capitol Square crowd. Only half of the 28 Virginians who participated in this year's Olympic Games could make it to the ceremony, but the audience was glad to see them. With the theme from Chariots of Fire in the background, Governor Robb introduced each participant. On hand was Joseph Fargus, the Petersburg athlete, who was one of only 20 Americans who won more than one gold medal. He got 2 as a member of the equestrian team. A trophy in honor of Virginia's Olympians was unveiled and presented to the State Sports Hall of Fame. And Governor Robb delivered a solemn message about the winners.
Because of their heroic realization of the best that they could be, we salute them. When we remember the 1984 Olympics, we will always hold a very special place in our hearts for these Virginians that we honor today.
Law enforcement agents are finally beginning to realize how much of a business drug trafficking is. At the state capitol this week, a General Assembly panel was urged to treat it like one. Literally tons of illegal drugs are seized by federal and state authorities every year. Literally thousands of drug pushers are arrested every year. But drugs are still widely available, and there are still plenty of people to handle them. So what are we missing?
We're arresting the people, and we were confiscating the product. The Capitol remained untouched. And that is the one element that allowed these operations to continue to exist.
John Russell of the Virginia State Police told a legislative panel studying drug trafficking it's time our state began going to the source. The 1982 General Assembly helped by allowing police to seize any cash, drugs, or materials used in a drug transaction. But Russell says the people and the product keep coming back.
As long as the Capitol remains there, as long as those assets are still available to be used, the organization will continue.
Russell suggests going after this capital, the money in the bank drug rings use to regroup after a bust. Virginia law requires a conviction before seizing those funds. By then, it's often too late. Federal drug agents can seize assets before a conviction and have recovered some $268 million in the past 3 years that way. According to Russell, that's the only way to make real progress in fighting drug traffic. It could take another 17 years to get rid of the cancer-causing asbestos insulation in state buildings. Since millions of dollars are required every year for that work, the state has decided to sue asbestos makers to reduce the effect on our state treasury. Attorney General Gerald Baliles will go to court to get about $30 million from asbestos manufacturing companies.
In light of the expense, the tremendous expenditure involved in rehabilitating and repairing those buildings, we've made a decision to bring suit against the manufacturers of asbestos in this country in order to recapture the cost to the Commonwealth of having to repair those buildings.
Virginia is the first state in the nation to become so concerned about cancer-causing asbestos in state buildings. The State Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation is working on a procedure to give it power to investigate patient suicides in private hospital psychiatric wards operating under state licenses. Dr. Joseph Avalar, director of the department's Office of Quality Assurance, says development of the procedure stemmed from an anonymous complaint received by Avalar's office about the safety of windows in Richmond's Metropolitan Hospital psychiatric ward. The complaint was filed June 4th, the day after a mental patient ran against a safety window in the hospital and fell to his death. Avalar says his office found that improvements need to be made in those windows. Richmond Sheriff Andrew Winston has again fired the chief of training at the city jail, the same man he fired and rehired earlier. Captain Robert Poland was first let go after he criticized in a TV interview the state-required training for jail guards. Winston rehired him and asked the State Corrections Department to review the jail's own training program. And now Winston says that review raised serious questions that Poland couldn't answer to the sheriff's satisfaction. The trucking lobby is one of the largest at the General Assembly, and as Laura Dunham reports, from all indications, the 1985 session won't provide any rest for the truckers.
That's right, Randy. This week, the trucking lobby was out full force for a meeting of the Joint Subcommittee studying the Federal Surface Transportation Assistance Act. The main topic of discussion was a proposed amendment to the state code which would allow large trucks to utilize state secondary routes. The main discussion before the committee was the safety of allowing these large trucks to use routes currently reserved for residential traffic. Delegate Earl Dickinson chaired that meeting.
And I think Peter Easter will be as lead-off speaker as he's done so often in the past. Peter, we welcome you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen of the committee. I'm Peter Easter. I'm the Executive Director of the Car and Truck Rental and Leasing Association of Virginia. I am here to request that the committee recommend to the full General Assembly legislation that would conform the width and length provisions of the Surface Transportation Assistance Act to all state roads, and more specifically either unlimited truck length or at least 65 feet plus 12 inches of tolerance and 102-inch width. The reasons for this request are quite specific. The first and most important is that the present 55-foot length does not allow the carrying of 80,000-pound gross vehicle weight because of the federal bridge formula. It is inconsistent for the Virginia Code to allow 80,000 pounds, and yet the overall length restrictions prevent it. For instance, a 48-foot trailer with a conventional cab tractor requires 65 to 66 feet when equipped with a sleeper cab. And at one of the earlier meetings, I handed out to you a drawing that I think showed this in more detail, but I won't go through that again. Under present law, Virginia manufacturers and truckers are penalized at a disadvantage to manufacturers in surrounding states which are conforming their laws to federal legislation. Thirdly, this matter has not been a serious problem since the Surface Transportation Act was enacted in 1982, mainly because with the recessionary economy, manufacturers and truckers were not buying new equipment. Now they are having to increase their fleets and want to be able to purchase vehicles that they can drive on all of the roads in Virginia and throughout other states. The 102-inch width may be a concern to many of you, but we would like to point out that for many years Virginia has allowed school buses of 100 inches wide on all of its roads throughout the Commonwealth. And this width is only 2 inches less than what we're requesting for trucks that are hauling freight and are being driven by professional drivers, not students and relatively untrained drivers, as is the case, unfortunately, with many of the school buses across the country, the state. And also, approximately 1/4 of the city of Richmond city buses are 102 inches wide. The last reason is, and I think you've heard this many times throughout these hearings, that because of the Surface Transportation Assistance Act and the state laws that have been changed in other states, that the trailer that had been the standard trailer that companies could purchase was a 45-foot by 96-inch trailer, and now the manufacturers are standardizing on the 48-foot and 102-inch wide vehicle. Those are really the reasons why we request this legislation. I think there's always been a serious concern about having the twin trailers operate on some of these roads, and we have obtained specifications from the truck manufacturers and trailer manufacturers, and with a 65-foot plus 12-inch tolerance, it'll be impossible to run the twin trailers and stay underneath that limit.
A complaint was raised before the committee that no hearings on this subject have been held in the Northern Virginia area.
This committee agreed to conduct 5 public meetings. Gentlemen, you have yet to hold a public meeting. You've held 5 special interest meetings. If I didn't know better, I would think you had your minds made up before this committee ever met and have arranged the meetings to support your decision. A public meeting, to be worthy of that term, must be held when and where the public can attend, namely in the evening or on a weekend, in areas impacted by the subject under discussion. A Harrisonburg meeting does not meet the needs of Arlington, does not meet the needs of Alexandria, does not meet the needs of Fairfax, does not meet the needs of Loudoun. An Accomack meeting does not meet the needs of Norfolk, nor Portsmouth, nor Hampton, nor Newport News, nor Virginia Beach, nor Chesapeake. And where have the localities been at these hearings? Do they know you were hearing testimony advocating the state taking over control of this over-dimensioned trucks legislative control? Do they know how these trucks will be controlled and who will pay for it? Where's the AAA, the watchdog for the average motorist? Will automobile and small truckers continue to subsidize our big trucks? What will be our government's policy on which transportation forms to subsidize and which to discourage? When will the trucking industry grow up and pay its own way? I call on you to have evening hearings in Northern Virginia, Tidewater, and in Richmond. You have not yet heard from the public, only the trucking industry. Any decision based on such limited testimony will be a disservice, or at best, limited service to this state. As a postscript, why are over-dimensioned trucks allowed on Corden Avenue between Sims Avenue and Hull Street? They can't go straight, they can't go right, they can't go left, and there's no trucking terminus there. Only overnight trucking's headquarters. Thank you.
Any questions? We have been requested to have a public hearing in Northern Virginia, and we are going to take it up among the commission today instead of date. I'll see what the committee wants to do. I believe that concludes those that have signed up, and I'm certain that we have other speakers here today relative to HJR 134.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Bruce Wingo, Virginia Railway Association. And as you all know, the railroad industry has a certain competitive interest in the issue. But it's more than just a competitive one. There's a basic principle, policy, decision that's going to have to be made at some point on overall transportation policy. And you all have been hearing, according to your minutes, quite a bit about various places that want the trucks to be able to run on the roads to serve their industries, whatever it might be. And the basic policy question is Virginia going to continue to allow and encourage, if you all should go affirmative on some of the requests you've had, the larger vehicles on the highways through the Commonwealth? You've got situations today like 6,000 and 7,000 heavy trucks a day on Interstate 95, every 24 hours running, and they're running parallel to one or more railroads. Now, the proposals that you are considering are going to be diverting. If you do widen the network to allow these longer, wider vehicles on more roads, you're going to be diverting more and more traffic off of the rail industry. We are hauling truck trailers from Florida to Delaware in less than 30 hours now. The railroad industry is trying to do a lot these days to improve their service. At the same time, we're doing that if more and more advantages or no additional cost are given to the trucking industry. Obviously, we're going to lose some of that business. Now, you've heard a lot, I'm sure, of the increased registration fees that the STAA imposed on the trucking industry. I'd remind you that the U.S. Secretary of Transportation said after the passage of that act that even if all of those fees were collected, the increments where they were staged out over 3 or 4 years, if every bit of that was, none of it backed off, as you know there's been a lot of pressure to do so, then they would still be paying only 40 or 50% of what the federal cost allocation studies have shown were due. Now, in addition to that particular policy question, you obviously have some safety and economic considerations too. Many of our highways that are being requested to allow into the wider, longer system were built long before the 80,000-pound truck was legal in Virginia. You take parts of US 1, they were probably built back when 55,000 pounds was max. We have sections of US 360 that are in the designated system right now that were probably laid down 20 years ago, long before we got to 73,280 or 76, much less 80,000 pounds. And so all of this, you know, the pavement can only hold up so long. Now, the rail industry, if we carry stuff overweight, we pay directly for it because we got to repair our right of way. We damage it, we pay for it direct, and we pay taxes on top of that.
In corrections news this week, the rate of escapes from Virginia prisons is still well below levels of the past decade. Statistics released recently show there were 93 escapes during the 1983-84 fiscal year. That's a rate of 9.45 escapes per 1,000 prisoners. That figure includes the May 31st escape of 6 condemned prisoners from the Mecklenburg Correctional Center. During the previous year, the number of escapes had dropped to an 11-year low of only 80 escapes, or 7.8 escapes per 1,000 prisoners. Virginia corrections officials say they and judges are trying to limit the number of juveniles in adult jails, despite the defeat of legislation to make the limits mandatory. Edward Murray, Deputy Director for Youth Services and Corrections, says we do want kids out of jails. Under an executive agreement between the department and Governor Robb, the department pledged to have ready by January 1st a plan to remove children from adult jails who shouldn't be there. Religion is mixing with politics on the presidential campaign trail, but that's not the only situation in which church-state separation seems fuzzy. There was a call for clarification this week by the nation's highest court.
That the court should find a violation of the Establishment Clause when 2 criteria are met. 1, when it finds that the purpose of government action is to aid religion, that's consistent with the Supreme Court's test, and, not or, and when it finds that the effect in some way endangers religious liberty.
Choper says the court can allow these religious church-state ties without being hypocritical about it. The 15 attorneys general in Williamsburg seemed in agreement. The inconsistency of the court needs attention. Attorney General Jim Maddox of Texas says it's impossible to tell why the current Supreme Court rules the way it does on religious issues. But he said since 5 of the justices are expected to retire in the next few years, maybe there's still hope. The price of milk is going up. The State Milk Commission this week okayed an increase in the amount paid farmers for raw milk. This hike, if passed on to consumers, could mean an increase of from 2.5 to 3 cents per gallon on the grocery shelves after mid-October. The jump in prices will end the nearly a year-long freeze on farm milk prices. Farm prices for fluid milk in Virginia cannot exceed those set by the Milk Commission. You might say they opened a real can of worms at the state capitol this week while discussing a license for saltwater fishermen. Commerce Secretary Betty Diener was trying to explain how boat owners could pay for one blanket license to cover everyone fishing from his boat. But Carl Herring from the Conservation Council of Angling Club said it will be a nightmare to enforce.
Seeing 15 or 20 people on a beach, and I'm thinking about Smith Island right now, or inside on the bay, or maybe a small island, 2 or 3 boats anchored there. Who's in which boat? Do all the boats have licenses? You'd probably find if one didn't have a license, for some strange reason, all 15 came in those 2 boats. But I'm just saying it'd be difficult. It's another problem with blanket licenses for small boats.
Virginia fishermen like the idea of more money for state fisheries, but they haven't yet taken the bait on the idea of a saltwater license. One of the presidential candidates who will be on your Virginia ballot this November says he doesn't want you to vote for a person. Independent Democratic candidate Lyndon LaRouche wants Virginians instead to vote for policies. The National LaRouche chairman this week told reporters at the state capitol her candidate doesn't expect to beat Reagan and Mondale.
However, a significant vote for Lyndon LaRouche and for Billy Davis, for the policies that they represent, under conditions of an assumed Reagan presidency, would introduce a situation in which Ronald Reagan would have no choice but to take significant notice of a large vote for the LaRouche candidacy, and as such would have to alter his policies in his second administration.
Billy Davis, a Mississippi farmer, is LaRouche's running mate. Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Edythe Harrison was in Richmond this week to open her downtown field office. She plans to use Democratic heavy guns to bolster what some have described as a lackluster campaign effort. Edythe Harrison's strategy will include riding the crest of Chuck Robb's popularity in Virginia as she tries to unseat a popular U.S. senator. Some have thus far accused her campaign of lacking a certain electricity. Her Richmond field office lacked a certain electricity as it was open near City Hall. The lighting was poor, but electricity more than made up for by ringing endorsements.
We have got a very strong contender who is carrying our banner proudly, and I have, as I've said on a number of occasions before, I support her campaign fully, unequivocally, and enthusiastically, and I hope that everyone else who is here will do the same thing.
He has made it as clear as any words could be spoken as to his support of Edythe Harrison, notwithstanding what some may have wanted to interpret or read into several things that may have occurred in the past.
And I want to make that very clear. There's never been any doubt in my mind as to where the Democratic Party of Virginia stands.
Happy birthday to you.
The party then threw a party for Ms. Harrison's 50th birthday. And Governor Robb said he hopes to celebrate her 51st birthday in her Washington Senate office. Well, this week at the state capitol, Governor Robb, as chairman of a new voter registration drive, and Owen Pickett, the chairman of the Mondale for President campaign in Virginia, held a news conference to announce a massive effort to get more voters to the poll.
They hope to register 10,000 new voters before the voter registration deadline of October 6. Delegate Pickett was asked during the news conference whether he felt the voter drive could help Mondale win Virginia, which is expected to go overwhelmingly Republican.
Well, when you're running for public office, every vote is important. So we think every one that we can get is certainly going to be a help. We don't think that the story in the campaign has been told yet, and we believe that a lot of the support for the other candidate might be is soft, and that once the issues become clear and the public focuses on this, that some of them might be changing their minds.
Yes.
Owen, what is the Children's Foundation?
I'm not entirely certain. Maybe John Jamerson could answer that one for you.
It's a group that's been in touch with the Democratic Party. It's a national group that is registering, that is working with Democratic parties around the country to help with voter registration. As to that's all I know about it. I don't know what its other functions are outside of voter registration.
Is there a person connected with it or getting it up in Virginia?
I tell you what, I can get that information at the state party.
Yes, yeah.
Delegate Pickett, I was wondering if you, and perhaps the governor too, since he's had a passing interest in this topic from time to time, could tell us why you think Virginia in particular are going to buy the courageous plan, as you call it, to raise our federal taxes.
Well, you characterize it as a plan to raise taxes. I think we've characterized it as a plan to pay as you go, which is very important. I think it's something that's pretty clearly embedded in the principles that we have in government in Virginia. And I think certainly the country would be a lot better off if we had it embedded in Congress in Washington.
Mr. Pickett, do you think that a lack of voter registration is the only thing standing between Mr. Mondale and victory in Virginia?
Well, certainly not the only thing, but in a campaign like this, everything helps.
Most of us feel an obligation, having been elected under the banner of our party, to support the candidates of our party, even though we may have differences. I must say that I'm much more pleased with the approach that the former vice president is taking to solving the long-term challenges of America from the convention forward than prior to the convention. But I'm going to support the nominee of my party, and I do so not only on the basis of what I think is a far more realistic approach to the fiscal dilemma that faces this country right now, but on the basis of a belief in him as an individual, notwithstanding whatever philosophical differences that we may have, as a very solid, able, capable individual that will be able to provide the kind of leadership that this country needs and will provide the kind of honest, straightforward answers that we require to some very difficult questions. And I look upon that as one of the real strengths, and the fact that he is now stressing fiscal responsibility makes me much more comfortable. The fact that he has talked about the defense system in ways that lead all of us to know that he will be supportive of the credible deterrence in terms of overall defense policy and foreign policy also makes me much more comfortable. But there are bound to be differences of opinion. We don't all think exactly alike. Most of us don't agree on every issue with our spouses or other members of the family.
Governor, as chairman of this voter registration drive, what will you be doing?
Well, to be perfectly honest, at this point, I'm not sure what specifically is going to be asked of me. I have agreed to assist in any way that I can to encourage those, as we've been doing, in voter registration efforts generally. And let me just say in response to an earlier question that was asked of Owen Pickett that I think it's very clear that both political parties and many others attempt to conduct registration drives, and clearly in seeking areas to emphasize, they're going to target those areas where they think the chances of generating at least 50% of the vote, if not more, for their candidate are going to be greater. But anyone that comes to register is going to be registered regardless of who sets up the registration drive. There's not going to be anyone ever turned away. Matter of fact, everyone, as Owen Pickett has said, will be encouraged to register and participate, regardless of whether or not they have given any indication whether or not they're going to support our party's candidates. And I don't want any misunderstanding on that question. Everyone is encouraged to register. Frankly, we think that it's to our advantage because there are more unregistered potential Democrats nationally, and I suspect the same is true of almost any region of Virginia, than there are unregistered Republicans.
Those are the top stories from the state capitol this week.
For gavel-to-gavel coverage of meetings here in the General Assembly building, join me for Virginia Legislature 84 Capitol events, weeknights at 7:30 on Channel 56 and 8 o'clock on Channel 53. I'm Laura Dunham.
And I'm Randy Davis. Join us next week for Richmond Report the Week. This program was pre-recorded in Richmond.
This is a production of WNVC Channel 56, Fairfax, Virginia.